Welcome, everybody, to this deep dive.
Yeah.
I think it's something that's on all of our minds these days. Yeah, how it is. Everywhere you turn, somebody's got the answers, like the complete answers to life, the universe, everything.
Yeah.
So we're going to unpack this excerpt
Okay.
from Beware of False Christs and False Prophets, a timely warning for today.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to see if you know this ancient warning, if it can help us at all in this digital age where we're just inundated constantly with information, like drinking from a fire hose, right?
Right. And it's so interesting because this warning, it's often rooted in religious texts. You know, you see it in a lot of different traditions.
Yeah.
But the thing that's so fascinating is that it really seems to resonate across cultures and different belief systems. Like, it speaks to something very fundamental about the human experience, this search for truth, this search for meaning. And I think that's something that makes us all a little bit vulnerable.
Oh, yeah.
You know, particularly in today's world.
Especially when it's like sandwiched between a cat video and like an ad for noise-canceling headphones.
Yeah.
You know, what's real?
Exactly. And that's precisely where the advice from the source on how to actually recognize these false prophets, it becomes so relevant.
Okay.
Because it's not really about the messenger themselves or the particular message. It's about those patterns of deception,
Yeah.
which honestly haven't changed that much over the centuries.
Yeah. Those patterns, I think that's such a good point because they're subtle. And a lot of times these figures that we're talking about, they can appear very convincing.
Oh, absolutely.
But there are some red flags.
Yeah.
I think that are really important to be aware of. And the source mentions this whole like me, myself, and I syndrome. Like
Right.
It's all about how great their life is and you should be just like them.
Right. And that's the first trap, right? It's instead of focusing on, genuine insights or, some universal truths, they're making themselves the product. They're putting themselves on a pedestal. And you think about those gurus, those influencers, they're constantly flaunting wealth and success.
Yeah.
And it's very seductive because we all want that quick fix.
Yeah.
But this source is suggesting that real growth rarely comes easy.
If it sounds too good to be true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to, I think, another really big warning sign. And it's those grand promises that come with zero accountability.
Mm-hmm.
They dangle the most enticing carrots,
Yeah.
instant wealth, effortless success,
Yeah.
but they never offer any real substance.
Right.
And if things go wrong, because they always do,
Yeah.
they take zero responsibility.
It's like they're selling you something.
Completely.
Have you noticed that? That a lot of times it's almost like they're playing on our desire to have things be easy.
Oh, yeah.
We want that shortcut.
Oh, absolutely. Our brains are wired for it. We love the quick fix.
Yeah.
We love that dopamine hit.
Right.
But, the source really argues that when we're caught up in this constant chase for a quick fix, it prevents us from doing the deeper work.
Mhm.
That leads to real lasting change.
Yeah, so it's not just about being wary of the messenger, but also maybe like looking inward a little bit. Like, what am I really seeking here?
100%. It's a question we should all be asking ourselves. Are we looking for genuine guidance?
Yeah.
Or are we just looking for that magic bullet, that quick fix?
And I think that probably ties into this next red flag, which I'm sure a lot of us have experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Manipulation and fear tactics.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, this tactic, it's about as old as time itself, but it feels like it's gotten a whole lot more pervasive in this digital age.
Yeah.
Because fear and outrage, they spread like wildfire online.
It's almost like they figured it out, like they hacked our brains or something.
Right.
Because they're tapping into our deepest fears, our insecurities. And then they turn around and say, like, don't worry, I'm the only one who's got the solution.
It got you covered.
Yeah. And it's like you can't even see straight when you're in it.
And you know what? It's particularly insidious because a lot of times the fears that they're tapping into are legitimate.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, this source isn't trying to say that we shouldn't have genuine concerns about the state of the world. It's just that we need to be really wary of those who try to exploit those concerns for their own gain.
Right.
Right. Think about those doomsday prophets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fear-mongering personalities. It's all over the internet.
Oh, it's everywhere.
Right. And they just thrive on this idea of urgency and panic.
Yeah. And I think what goes along with that is that us versus them mentality that they create.
100%.
Right. Like we're the only ones who get it. Everyone else is out to get you.
Yeah, you're either with us or you're against us. It's
Yeah.
like this false dichotomy that makes it so hard to question anything they're saying
Right.
without feeling like you're betraying the group or something.
Right.
And so that's when those critical thinking skills become absolutely essential.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of those critical thinking skills, let's dig into that a little bit
Yeah.
because I know the source emphasizes how important those are for this whole discernment process.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with what it calls contradictory or harmful teachings. So how do we even recognize that in the context of this digital age?
Yeah. Well, I think it's about being really aware of the subtle inconsistencies in someone's message.
Okay.
Like let's say you've got a self-proclaimed guru preaching about generosity,
Right.
but they're living this lavish lifestyle
Mhm.
while their followers are struggling to make ends meet.
Okay.
Or maybe it's someone who's advocating for peace and harmony, but at the same time, they're inciting all this hatred and division online.
Actions speak louder than words.
100%. And sometimes those inconsistencies, they're glaring, they're obvious.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they're more insidious.
Right.
They're harder to spot. That's why the source is encouraging us to go beyond the surface.
Oh,
Right. You have to look at the underlying message and think about its potential impact. So ask yourself, are these teachings really lining up with some of those core universal values?
right.
Compassion, integrity, respect.
Yeah.
Or is it something else entirely? Is this person pushing a narrow self-serving agenda?
And it's hard, too, because sometimes these figures are so charismatic and convincing.
Oh, they're master manipulators.
It's easy to just be like, oh, they're just misunderstood or, they mean well.
Yeah, and that's precisely why it's so important to have those external checks and balances,
Yeah.
Like a trusted community, access to good, solid information from reliable sources,
Mhm.
because it's in those moments of doubt that we need to be able to just step back
Right.
and go, okay, hold on a second. Let me get a second opinion on this.
And that actually leads us to another warning sign that the source points to, which is a lack of transparency.
Oh, yeah.
Big one.
So what's the big deal about transparency? And why should it matter to us if somebody's being kind of secretive or they get defensive when we start asking questions?
Well, I think it boils down to this. Transparency builds trust,
Okay.
right? If somebody's really and truly there to guide you,
Mhm.
to help you, they're not afraid to be upfront with their methods. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Their motivations, even their own flaws and
Oh.
shortcomings.
They're not afraid to be vulnerable.
They're not trying to hide anything. But if you've got someone who's always dodging questions,
You're right.
hiding information, making excuses for their behavior, it just makes you wonder, don't you think?
Mm.
It makes you wonder if they're really looking out for you or if they're more invested in protecting themselves and their image.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot here, and it can feel overwhelming
Oh, absolutely.
because we're talking about like this digital landscape where there's so many voices
So many.
vying for our attention.
It's overwhelming.
And we're trying to figure out who's trustworthy and who isn't.
Yeah, but the good news is the source doesn't leave us hanging. You know, it doesn't just give us this laundry list of warning signs and then says, good luck out there.
Right.
Right. It also gives us some actually practical advice
Yeah.
on how to stay grounded,
Okay.
how to be discerning
Yeah.
in this crazy world that's just saturated with information.
Okay,
It's-
great. So what can people actually do? What are some steps that our listeners can take to, protect themselves from being taken in by these figures and to find their way to those sources of truth?
Well, I think it starts with being really proactive about seeking out different points of view. So instead of just, scrolling through your social media feed
Mm.
or relying on algorithms to kind of spoon feed you information, branch out a little bit.
Get out of the echo chamber.
Exactly. Explore different perspectives, even if they make you a little uncomfortable.
Right.
Read a variety of things. Talk to experts. Have real conversations with people who see the world differently than you do.
Yeah, just be open.
Be open to learning and growing, even if it means, kind of shaking things up a bit in your own worldview.
And challenging your own assumptions.
Exactly. And, this might sound a little counterintuitive, but I think the source also really emphasizes the importance of bringing a sense of humility to all of this.
Humility. I like that.
Yeah.
Because, that's not something you hear a lot about these days.
No, not at all. Especially online.
Yeah, it's all about, look at me, look at me.
It's all about self-promotion. But you know what this source is saying? Is it takes a certain amount of humility
Okay.
to really be discerning.
Okay.
You have to be able to admit that you don't know everything,
Right.
be open to the possibility that you might be wrong,
Yeah.
and be willing to learn from people who see things differently than you do.
It's like we're all in this together,
We are.
trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Nobody has all the answers.
Exactly. And, that actually brings us to the last bit of advice that I wanted to touch on from the source, and that is about cultivating a supportive community.
Okay, so you were talking before about, not getting stuck in those echo chambers,
Right.
not just surrounding ourselves with people who agree with us all the time.
Right.
So how do we actually go about building a community that can support us?
Well, I think it starts with being open to connecting with people who come from different backgrounds,
Yeah.
have different life experiences than you, and, engage in dialogue even when you disagree.
Oh, yeah.
But do it respectfully. Really try to listen to what that other person is saying and be open to the possibility that you might actually learn something.
Be open to being wrong.
Exactly. And, the benefit of having that kind of community, it's like having this built-in safety net, right? So that as you're navigating all of the complexities of this digital world,
Yeah.
you've got people there to help you sort through all of the noise.
Yeah, it's like having people to bounce ideas off of,
Exactly.
get their take on things.
People who know you, and who care about you.
That makes a big difference.
It does. And, the source reminds us that this whole business of seeking truth, it's not a one and done deal.
Right.
It's not like you arrive at the truth and then that's it, you're done.
Yeah, it's a journey.
It's an ongoing journey, and there are always going to be new challenges, new voices, new opportunities to learn and grow.
Always something. So it sounds like what we're talking about here is having a balance
Yeah.
of skepticism, but also open-mindedness.
Absolutely.
We've got to think critically, but we've also got to trust our gut.
100%.
And, maybe even more importantly, we need to find those people who can support us on the journey.
Could not agree more. Well said.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
I feel like we've taken this ancient warning about false prophets, something that's been around for centuries, and we've really unpacked how relevant it still is today, especially in this digital age. But I think the most important takeaway here is that we're not powerless. We have tools.
Yes, we do.
We have strategies. We can use those to navigate this world with a little more discernment, a little more wisdom, and hopefully avoid some of those pitfalls along the way.
And never forget you've got this.
Yeah.
Trust yourself. Stay curious.
Mm-hmm.
And never underestimate the power of a good community.
Beautifully said. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thank you.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking truth.